It seems like everywhere you turn online these days, AI is just staring you in the face.
Yeah, it really does feel like it's inescapable.
And I don't know about you, but sometimes it can get a little overwhelming.
Totally. And all this jargon gets thrown around.
Right.
Algorithms, machine learning, neural networks.
Like you need a whole dictionary just to even understand what people are talking about half the time.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we wanted to take a look at today in this deep dive.
Yeah, we want to get to the bottom of what AI is really all about. Strip away all the complexity,
Demystify it.
demystify it, and actually show you that it's a lot simpler than it sounds.
It really is.
And what's interesting is that we looked at a bunch of material on AI for this, and it turns out you don't really need like a computer science degree to get it.
No, not at all.
It all boils down to one pretty fundamental idea.
Yeah, and it's an idea that's pretty easy to grasp.
Are you ready for this?
I think so.
At its heart, AI is all about recognizing patterns,
Oh, yeah?
like putting the pieces together.
It's that simple.
That's the core of it.
So simple. Yeah.
It is. And I think what's really interesting is that the vast majority of applications that you encounter today, particularly in the world of machine learning, operate on this basic principle of recognizing patterns.
Okay, so pattern recognition. What does that actually mean, like in the real world? How does that actually work?
Well, imagine you're trying to teach an AI to recognize a hand.
Okay.
You wouldn't just show it one picture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you'd probably show it a lot.
You'd show it tons of pictures,
Oh,
thousands of pictures of hands, right?
Right. Open hands, closed hands.
Different skin tones, different positions, seen from all sorts of different angles. And the AI looks at all these images and it starts to pick out what are the things that keep showing up? What are the common features?
Like 5 fingers.
5 fingers, you've
Yeah.
got the palm, the general shape, and it learns to identify those key characteristics that consistently define what you would call a hand.
So it's kind of like building a mental checklist. Yeah, absolutely. It's building its own understanding of what a hand is based on all these examples.
Right, so that's machine learning.
Yeah.
Is it essentially just going through all this data and
Yeah. Machine learning is that process of going through, observing all this data, picking out those patterns, understanding those patterns, and then using them to make predictions about new data that it hasn't seen before.
like if you were teaching it what a cat was, you'd show it a bunch of pictures of cats.
Right.
And then you showed it a picture of a dog and it'd be like, that's not a cat.
That's not a cat because it's missing these key features that I've learned are associated with cats.
It's fascinating. And it's kind of like the way we learn language, too,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
if you think about it.
Yeah.
When you're learning a new language, you see enough examples of how words are used together, you start to get a feel for the grammar.
Right. The path.
You don't even realize you're doing it.
The sentence structure.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you start to be able to form your own sentences even though nobody's explicitly told you the rules.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way to think about it. And this whole idea of pattern recognition, it's not just some abstract concept. You see it in action all the time online.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Well, think about those KPTCA trade shows.
You mean those things where you have to click all the squares with a bus or a traffic light?
Those are the ones.
Ugh, I hate those so much.
They can be a little frustrating.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is while you're sitting there proving that you're human, you're also unknowingly helping to train AI models.
Really?
Yeah.
So those CHAs are actually training AI.
For example, Google famously uses these tasks to help their AI get better at recognizing objects and patterns in images.
That's kind of wild.
Isn't it?
So every time I'm like squinting at my screen trying to figure out if that's a crosswalk or a fire hydrant,
You're contributing to the advancement of AI.
I'm actually teaching a robot.
That's right.
That's pretty cool.
It is, and it really highlights how fundamental this process of pattern recognition is. And it's not limited to just images either. Let's talk about how AI deals with text,
Oh, okay.
especially with all the buzz around large language models or LLMs.
Right, like GPT.
Like GPT.
The things that can write emails and answer your questions and like generate code, it seems so much more complex than just picking out, a blurry bus in a picture.
It does seem that way, but at its core, the idea is still the same.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So how do they work?
Well, LLMs, they work by analyzing massive amounts of text data.
Okay.
They build up this incredibly sophisticated understanding of language.
So they're like reading all the books and all the websites and all the...
All the articles, all the code, all the everything, and they're looking for patterns in how words are used together.
So they're not actually understanding the meaning of the words the way you or I would.
Not in the traditional sense of understanding.
Yeah.
Instead, they're using a base dictionary or a data set, and they're looking for statistical patterns,
Okay.
which words words often follow other words, what combinations tend to create coherent sentences, and so on. And this is where the concept of tokenization comes in.
Tokenization. Okay, break that down for me.
So think of it like this. You take a sentence and you break it down into smaller pieces.
Okay,
These pieces are called tokens.
got it.
And these tokens can be individual words, parts of words, even punctuation marks.
Okay.
The LLM analyzes the patterns of how these tokens appear and are used in relation to each other across all the text data that it's been trained on.
So it's like instead of reading a sentence and understanding the grammar, the AI is seeing patterns in how these little pieces fit together.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
And so when you ask an LLM a question, it doesn't go searching through some giant database for a ready-made answer.
Right.
It's not like looking something up on Google. It's actually using all the patterns it's learned to predict which sequence of tokens is the most likely and relevant response to what you've asked.
So it's more about prediction than understanding.
Exactly. It's prediction based on these learned patterns. And this same principle of recognizing patterns, it extends to visual data as well.
Oh, interesting.
Like when AI generates images or videos.
Yeah, or recognizes objects in a photo.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does that work with something like AI creating a 3D model or even a video?
Well, it's all about identifying patterns in visual data.
Okay.
So when an AI is trained to generate a 3D model, for example, it learns the basic structures of objects.
Dumb.
What a chair typically looks like, the fundamental geometry of a car, the proportions of a human body.
Right.
It recognizes these underlying patterns and then uses them as a blueprint to create new detailed visuals.
So it's kind of like learning the rules of what these things look like.
Absolutely.
And how does it work with video?
So with video generation, AI can observe patterns of movement from existing videos or even just 2D images.
Okay.
It learns how objects or people typically move the arc of a ball when you throw it the way someone walks down the street. And then it can translate those observed patterns into a 3D space using digital tools to recreate realistic actions.
So it's not just making stuff up. It's basing it on things that it's already seen.
Exactly. It's all based on those patterns.
I never thought about it like that.
And, when you think about all these different applications, object recognition, language processing, image and video generation, what's the one thing that ties them all together?
Patterns.
Pattern recognition, that's the key.
It all comes back to patterns.
It does, and this ability to recognize patterns is what allows AI to automate tasks so efficiently.
And I guess the more data it processes, the better it gets at it.
Exactly. The more data it processes, the more patterns it can identify, the more accurate and sophisticated its predictions and responses become.
So it's not magic. It's just data and patterns.
It's not magic. It's a lot of data and a lot of pattern recognition.
Okay, so the next time I hear someone talking about AI in some really complex way,
Bring it back to the basics.
I should just think about patterns.
Remember that core idea of pattern recognition.
Right, because at its heart, it's all about that. So AI, it's not some mysterious entity. It's just about spotting connections in data and using those to do things.
That's a great way to put it.
And that makes it seem a lot less intimidating.
I hope so.
It does.
Yeah.
But it also kind of makes you think, if AI is all about recognizing and responding to patterns, how much of what we consider intelligence also relies on the same thing?
That's a really interesting question.
It is, right?
It makes you think about the world a little differently.
Yeah.
Like, how much of our own intelligence is based on pattern recognition?
Think about all the things that we do every day,
Absolutely.
How much of that is just us recognizing patterns and reacting to them?
It's a fascinating thing to consider, and it really makes you appreciate the power of this concept.
It really does, and it kind of gives you a new perspective on how we learn and understand the world.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been really eye-opening for me,
I'm glad.
and I hope it's been helpful for everyone listening as well.
Me too.
It's definitely made AI seem a lot less mysterious and a lot more understandable.
That was the goal.
And it all comes back to patterns. Who knew?
Patterns are everywhere.
Thanks for joining me today
It was my pleasure.
and helping to break it all down.
Anytime.
And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in to this deep dive into the world of AI.
Keep learning.
And until next time, keep exploring those patterns.
They're all around you.
You might be surprised what you find.